Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran Kansas City Jazz saxophonist and educator, the great Todd Wilkinson. He talked about his newest venture, the 2019 CD On the Lam. It's a great listen. He is a lifelong native of Kansas City, and he has been performing professionally since 1983. He graduated from Shawnee Mission Northwest High School in '78 and got his start playing in rock bands shortly thereafter. He's been around, and he's got great stories and recollections about Kansas City jazz and the idiom at large. In 2010, he began his current position as the Director of Jazz Studies at Ottawa University in Ottawa, Kansas. He's got a unique perspective as a performer and, equally, as an educator. Don't miss this interview with a Kansas City institution. Please get to know Todd and dig this interview, my friends.
At any rate, Todd, I can't believe we haven't spoken before. Seems like I've made my rounds around the Kansas City scene so much. So thank you for taking a minute out to talk with Neon Jazz. I'm looking forward to it.
My pleasure, man. I'm sorry, too. It's sort of a blessing of riches, you know. I have so many things going on. I'm just constantly in motion. And unless I just kind of bang into you someplace or we make an actual date for lunch and put it in my calendar.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. I had dinner with some friends last night. I haven't seen them for months, and I love them. And I'm sitting there having dinner going, man, I love these people.
Yeah.
Why has it been 4 months, you know, since I've seen these? Because I live in the moment. That's my biggest problem. If I really don't try to extend the path at all, the past,
yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly not trying to invite the future. I'm just right here all the time. And so... And I'm never bored. I love everything, so that's another problem.
Well, it's a good problem to have. Yeah, we
I'm
do
glad
that.
You called. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're always reminding my son to live in the moment. So yeah, I totally understand that. It's something that we all need to do more. But thank you for sending out the CDs. I want to talk to you about your latest release, On the Lam. It's a great disc. Give me your idea of what your artistic vision for this project was.
Okay, so yeah, On the Lam is more that's the one that's sort of my idea of jazz not for jazz people necessarily, you know.
Okay.
But so a lot of the tunes, have backbeats, are kind of funky, kind of in your face, aggressive, a lot of blues in them, or there's a few of them on there that are like a bossa nova or the Latin kinds of things, just things that will kind of attract people's attention that aren't necessarily musicians or connoisseurs, if you will, of straight-ahead jazz. That's what On the Lam is. And then the other album, On Ice, that one's more straight-ahead, more acoustic, not as much electric bass, more solos, more, And then the quintets I'm doing the same kind of thing. That's more of a academic kind of world sax quartet sort of meets, I don't know. Those are just different things I do as a musician. I cover a lot of bases because I'm academically trained, but I spend a lot of time playing in R&B bands and rock bands. I spent quite a bit of time playing straight ahead jazz and tons of time playing big band music. So there's all kinds of I don't know. I have just different tastes and things I like to do. So On the Lam, that's more intended for to generate an audience of people that might not necessarily go out looking for jazz music at night. Something I could play in a blues club, and I'd still be just fine playing that music at BB's. They'd be okay with
Absolutely.
that. I walked in and played a Charlie Parker tune. They'd actually tolerate it, but it would just be so outside of their wheelhouse that they'd be thinking, what the heck?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
And I think one of the there's a couple of, my biggest issue with jazz is that there aren't any hit records anymore. And there used to be when I was coming up in the 70s and 80s even, guys were cracking the top 40 with instrumental music or at least things that were jazz-like Benson's Breezin', or Mangione, Feels So Good. Those things were big hits, and they were playing on the radio. In fact, I remember Romantic Warrior played on the radio, and Jean-Luc Ponty, Imaginary Voice, that was all over the radio. And I remember hearing Weather Report on the radio, on top 40 AM or FM radio. So you just don't hear much of that. And I'm not very interested in the smooth jazz thing or the groovy, you know. I mean, it's just not my thing. I like things that are a little more hard-hitting. So more of a jazz rock thing, I guess, is really what it is. It goes back to my roots. When I was a kid, it was called jazz rock. American Garage was considered a jazz rock album, even though now we look at it and we call it fusion. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, totally, it does. So, speaking of roots, you're a native of Kansas City, born and raised here, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Kansas City. I was born in Providence Hospital, 1960. God dang. And then my dad worked for Panhandle Eastern Natural Gas Pipelining Company all my life. And so we moved out to Liberal, Kansas for 6 or 7 years. He built a pumping station out there, and then we moved back to Kansas City in 67, I think. And then we wound up bouncing around it back when, you know, Quivira was a gravel road past 95th Street. 75th Street didn't go all the way through. It was a gravel road right where it hit Neiman. And I went to Shawnee Mission Northwest.
How did you get involved with liking jazz and wanting to become a musician?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So, you know, I'm a product of public school music, really, and that's how I got into it. And I played in band, and I started playing in big bands when I was in 7th grade at Trail Ridge Junior High. I've played in a big band ever since, you know, either directing one or playing in, or, you know. So public school music, really. And then as I started to get older, I got into rock and roll. I really liked playing drums. I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to go learn how to be a musician. I was a singer, too. I went to Arizona State on a voice scholarship. And when I got there, just a couple of strange little things happened, and I switched over to saxophone and quit playing drums, oddly enough. I just didn't have the skill level on everything. So that's how I really kind of went down the path of learning how to play well enough to be a professional musician.
Was it always going to be jazz for you? Did you know that you were going to become a professional musician, or were there other things?
It wasn't always going to be jazz. It was just going to be music. I wanted to be, like, I like, you know, the bands that I really liked at the time when I was an impressionable youth, like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, you know, that kind of a thing. So I don't know what you call that. That's jazz to me now, or even then it was, but a lot of people would call that R&B or rock and roll. I was totally into rock and roll at that point, too. Not very wild about disco music. That was a real downer for me. But I loved Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. I mean, I went to 1 million concerts in high school, like 100, you know. Saw the Pink Floyd Animals tour and Heart, and, you know, I just saw the summer jams we used to go to. And so I was just really into the whole social thing. Plus, I like to get high and party and be a crazy boy. Sworn to find, loyal to none kind of thing. And I didn't want to just take a job and work inside all day. And I thought, well, man, I'm smart enough to do this. I can make this work. So I went to college to study jazz because it was the closest thing to rock and roll. And I didn't have rock and roll at college, so I thought, well, I'll just do this jazz thing, you know. And it wound up to be a blessing.
How did it all begin as a musician for you in the beginning? Like, how did everything start taking off and becoming a pro musician?
Yeah, that's a little more problematic. Well, I met some guys in college, and we started a band, and we played weather report tunes. We were called the Hint Band. And then the singer's father, she was out there going to school, and her father was very wealthy, and she got married to a great bass player in Phoenix, and they bought a nightclub called Chewy's. And so we became the house band for this singer at Chewy's. And so we started playing music there. And then on the nights I wasn't working, I would run the door, and they would have like Steps Ahead or the Dixie Dregs, and I'd get to go to all the shows and stand at the door taking tickets, 20 feet from these guys. So there was sort of that intro. And then like the band at my school was a really good band. It was international players. I mean, when I first landed at Arizona State, Lewis Nash was the drummer in the big band. He was like 20, and killing.
Yeah.
A lot of players like that at Arizona State in 1978, 79. And so, the the dean of music at Boston College now was a saxophone player in the program, and he was older, and so I got to see these guys role modeled a lot of stuff for me. Like, that's how this works. Bob Washut, who's had a great career in Northern Iowa, he was my band director of the second band. He was working on his master's degree, and so I met just a ton of people that were on their way in and through. I met tons of musicians. I mean, hanging at a bar with Don Menza drinking Irish whiskey, and Frank West and Dexter Gordon playing my tenor saxophone, and I could just keep going on. Herbie Mann, the Shelley Man, there's hundreds of jazz musicians that would come through doing gigs at the school, because the teachers there were like Tom Ferguson and Chuck Maroonick. They were seasoned veterans coming out of other places. So it's kind of a social scene, You sort of hang out with people, and you meet people, and then they have a network, and then they know people, and then you meet those people. It's just like that. It's just the social element of music. It's a pretty small world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other part of you is that you're an educator. You've been at Washburn University, University of Kansas, and since 2010 you've been at Ottawa. What is it about education? What is it about you lending what you know or being involved with the future of jazz that's so important?
Oh, I just like people, man. I'm a devout Hindu, and so my whole thing is pretty much trying to get out of my own ego, which I can't hardly do because my ego's huge. And so I like being with other people, and that's the thing that colleges have. And you have colleagues, and then you have administrators, and you have students, and then you're going out. You're just moving through a lot of different social environments where you get it's sort of like entertainment or attention-tainment, if you will. You're just looking to inspire people and then also give them something that they can keep or use for themselves in another way. Or I just like that. It's passing the torch. It's kind of like an academic union or an academic, apprenticeship sort of thing, because they don't have the apprenticeship system like they used to have in the 40s and 50s, where you could just go play professionally, playing every night and then practicing during the day. And, when you were in the guys in Miles Davis band, that was what they did. They practiced all day, ate food, drank, played the gig, played another gig. It was a life.
Yeah.
I was hoping by the end of college, I was thinking, well, maybe I can get good enough to get in Woody Herman's band, And then he died. Oh God, dang it! All those guys. I was just in a weird crack. I came in during Fusion. That was a time when there was a 10-year period there where guys just didn't go play jazz. Really. Between about 1965 and 1980, until the Marsalis brothers kind of came back in. You couldn't get a gig playing jazz. You had to play dance music. You go in the Plaza, it was all horn bands in the 70s disco, man. Top 40.
Yeah.
So there just wasn't any places to play, and I wasn't good enough either. I'll give you that. I'm not a great player. I'm really kind of a dilettante. And so that also suits me well at the college. I can do a lot of things. I can do composition. I can write. I can teach history. I can teach non-majors. I can teach saxophone and woodwind. I can do a whole bunch of things, and it sort of suits my proclivities, or it suits my talents. I'm sort of a multi doubler. I'm an academic doubler, like a woodwind doubler.
You've been through this town. You've been in this town. You've seen so many incarnations of things that happen. What do you like best about Kansas City?
Well, Kansas City is a soulful town, period. I mean, that's the reason so many Kansas City musicians can go other places. Kansas City is a place where people tell stories, really good stories, meaningful ones, and that's what the blues is. I mean, Kansas City is really a blues town. It's where blues and jazz got hitched up, in the mid-'30s. Gee, I mean, if you're thinking of Jamin Shin's a good example of that jump blues thing, That, to me, that's Kansas City music, and that's all about, does it swing, and is it soulful, and do you mean it, and And can you entertain people? Can you get up in front of people that don't know anything about anything and keep their attention and have them, and will they buy drinks and dance and then buy your CD? And being an entertainer, that's a big deal. It's not a big deal to some people. There is a lot of academic music out there, and that's just as valuable, I think, but it's a different deal. And I don't think it's as big a deal in Kansas City as it would be in, say, New York or parts of Los Angeles or, except Chicago's kind of the same way. Chicago's a very soulful town. So is New Orleans.
You got a really good pulse, I think, on being in education and being a performer and being in a town like Kansas City that's really actually doing quite well. What is the health of jazz in America in 2020?
That's a tough question. Everybody's asking that question. And so, the first thing you got to say is, what do you mean by jazz? Because there's a lot of people out there that have a lot. It's not a very good term as far as defining music. Do you mean Stan Getz, 1958? Which was a great year for jazz, I think. One of the best years for jazz. A lot of great records came out. So, what is jazz? Is it a style of music? Is mainstream jazz what you're talking about? For me, jazz is kind of a behavior. It's sort of a set of loose base rules that it's like a gumbo, you can make a lot of different kinds of it. So, I don't know. I think it's as healthy as it's ever been. Kansas City's always had more music than it should have for this population size that it is. It's always been pretty good. It's just it may not satisfy you the exact way you want to because of what's going on in whatever the economy or media or. So there have been times where it wasn't as good to be a straight-ahead jazz musician as it is maybe today. But, you could always get gigs playing the blues. You could always get gigs playing Dixieland music. You get gigs playing casuals, parties, bands, wedding bands. So do you want to do service music or do you want to just do art music? Do you want to do concerts or do you want to play club dates? Do you want to play shows? For me, it's just professional music. I don't even care anymore. The jazz thing, I suppose it implies a rhythm section, swing, improvisation, of sectional forms like the blues and rhythm changes and maybe the Great American Songbook and bebop and that's a really difficult question to answer, right? There's not a strong music union anymore, much to my chagrin. I wish there was, but I don't think people complain about not being able to make a living playing club dates, but nobody's ever been able to make a living playing club dates. So I don't know. There's no way really to answer your question and be correct. I don't think. I think it's just music, and it's just been as good as it's ever been, and people are going to find new ways to. Really, the bottom line as a musician is: have you found an audience or not? If you find an audience, you're good to go, and you like what you're doing. And then is that jazz? I don't know.
Yeah.
And live music is really that's kind of my thing. Is it live music? Then you're good to go. You play music? Yeah. Do you perform it live? Then I like you a lot. Oh, you play violin? Want to jam? Cool. We should make music. So I don't know. You're not going to probably play like concertos or sonatas or recital music or new music but I don't think anybody ever expected to make a living just playing new music. There's new music ensembles, but you're really, the audience is much smaller for that, and you have to cast a much wider net. So then you need to be going national or international with that kind of thing. It just depends. How do you value a good band? Well, you look at the cash register at the end of the night at a bar, and if there's a lot of money in there, that was a good band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's sad.
Yeah, I dig it.
It's like, and then they're like, well, you're selling out. Well, okay. I got to buy food, man, so I need money. So how do I make money? Playing live music. It's tricky, man. I feel for cats, that have expectations that audience is going to come up and appreciate them and put them on a pedestal that they deserve, really. But nevertheless, you know, people are out there playing them. I mean, I see these sax players and they're just killing it, man, and nobody's listening to them. They're just talking. And I don't know. Have you heard Steve Martin play?
Oh, man. Yeah, totally.
He's an amazing player. When I go in, I have to just hold my jaw closed so it doesn't hit the table, you know. And then I sit right in front of him and I just go, God damn, this guy's amazing, you know. But then all around him, I'm the only guy. Me and the other musicians are listening, you know, and we're all drinking coffee.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
So Steve has to move around, man. He's got to go to Stockholm, you know, and France, and you know, and amen to that. That's fantastic. I love that. But if you're just going to stay in Kansas City and play, and it's always been this way, if you're going to play in Kansas City for a living, you got to play dance music at some point, and you got to have people come in and buy something, product of some sort, usually booze or food or, you know, a cover charge. Or did you remember when I had that club, the Drum Room? I had a band called Boko Maru.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever hear that CD, that Dreamland CD?
I didn't, no.
Man, you should check that out. That's a great CD, and it's pop music. And the whole idea was that band was going to be musicians' music for non-musicians. It was very successful. It's just we just didn't know how to market ourselves, really, because we weren't anything. We were kind of everything.
Yeah.
And we were a real hybrid. And, man, you listen to that album, Boko Maru, Dreamland. Check that out.
I will. I totally will.
It's
so
jazz. It'll blow your mind anyway.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. That's the kind of route I love going down. So let me ask you this. Why do you love jazz?
Because, really? I mean, the reason I love jazz is because when Dexter Gordon plays a solo, his solo is every bit as profound as the melody of the tune he's playing on. And those tunes he's playing are pretty damn profound. You know, when he plays Darn That Dream, man, he wails on the melody, which I love. And I love melodies. That's why I play saxophone, because without melodies, we wouldn't have these tunes, you know. That's why we're playing them. And, man, when he solos like that, have you heard that Dexter Gordon Ballads album?
Yeah.
It's just called Dexter Gordon Ballads. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
His ballad playing is fantastic. And so, you know, the stories that Cannonball Adderley, like on Something Else, you know, that just blew my mind, man. Those solos are so good. I mean, I know them note for note. I can sing kind of blues. The solos become they're frozen compositions, you know? And, or Art Pepper meets the rhythm section. That whole record's killer. You know, it's not as probably technically as intense, but man, the stories, you know, that's why I like Frankie Trumbauer or Louis Armstrong. Oh my God, Hotter Than That. That solo he takes on Hotter Than That, that's such a great story. And it's so enduring. And it's even better, I don't know, it's Louis Armstrong too. You know, I mean, nobody else could play that solo, and it just wouldn't be the same story if somebody else told it. Whereas, I guess that's what it is, you know. We tell these stories in our own way, and they're better because we're of the person that's telling the story. And not everybody's cut out to be a great storyteller. But the great storytellers are fantastic, you know. Yeah,
totally. I agree. And
it's sort of like improvising over something that everybody knows. So it's, you know, if I knew the Gettysburg Address well enough and I could riff on it, it would be cool. You know, that would be like, whoa. Sweet. Check that out.
Totally.
Man. He's doing the Gettysburg Address, but it's probably added that. Oh, I never thought about that. And so I think that's what it is. It just allows me to, when I hear those solos and I get them in my mind, they become me. I become that. Gosh, I don't know what that means. It's sort of like a religion or something. You know, it's like a, I don't know, man. It helps me to, it just gives me meaning, and it's not just an intellectual, but it's also a real emotional thing as well. So it's a mind and body experience that I find very satisfying. That's only the only thing that approaches that is LSD for me. But I don't do that anymore. But I did have some good moments up in a pine tree in Four Peaks, Arizona. It was a good night.
Right on. I dig it totally.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but when you're able to actually realize that there's this great, for me anyway, there's a great disconnect physically and mentally from really what's going on, and we kind of all live in a sort of a state of ego delusion. And music is a way to get out of that, because it's a place where you go that you don't have arms and legs, and you're not running a fever, or you need to eat. When you're playing music, it's just like you're not. It's different. It's in a world of sound. It's close to the, what do they call that? Astral plane. It's like one step next to the astral plane. It's not quite like a dream when you're dreaming. You know what I mean? When you're dreaming, it's like real, but it's not.
Right. Yeah, I totally know.
And music's kind of like that too, except it leans a little more towards it's more in the realm of conscious reality. It's not so much unconscious. But some guys, I think, can really approach transcendence when they play. I think Train was damn close. Michael Brecker was pushing the limits. I think Pat Metheny can do it. There are some guys that transcend certain kinds of physical, temporal limitations using music. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then once you set that precedent, then there's a tradition. There's a marker in time. I mean, it's just a great metaphor for all of reality. And for me, it just makes more sense to me than buying a boat or fishing, or or even doing sit-ups.
Absolutely.
I guess you can find that. Another thing I'm really into is I study Chin style Tai Chi. Yeah, and it's an attempt to understand the Tao, which is or Yin Yang actually, and it's a way to the goal is to unify mind, body, and spirit all into one thing. That's tricky. Yeah, and we spend a lot of time and a lot of pressure in a lot of ways trying to make ourselves look like somebody, or talk like somebody, or dress like somebody, or be some sort of, and with music, it's totally there as well. But the jazz thing allows you, the part of the aesthetic of jazz is that you get to be you. It's not important what tune Louis Armstrong played. It's important that Louis Armstrong played the tune. It's got the performer aesthetic, not the composer aesthetic.
That's a great answer, man. So everything's going to come down to this. I want to know this. Everyone has their perception of you. Your family, your friends, your students, fans, but you know yourself as. Who do you think you are?
I am the Atman. I'm deluded by Maya. Quite simply. I couldn't tell you who I am, man. Yeah, I'm not sure it's really even true. I think, I think I'm probably just as real as whatever anybody thinks I am. Really.
Yeah.
That's the way. Yeah. I mean, when you think of Louis Armstrong, it's not really Louis Armstrong, but he's iconic, and you know him, and you have your own thing. But you might be, if you'd have been lucky enough, and dang it, I wish I had met him. But just imagine sitting down with Louis Armstrong for 15 minutes, and you'd have a whole nother vibe about Louis. Then imagine hanging out doing a gig with Louis Armstrong, or going on the road with him for 6 months, or being married to him. All those Louis Armstrongs would be different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I am whatever your impression is of me, or however much time you spend with me. I'm just the guy that you could leave me look, you could hand me $20,000 cash, put your 12-year-old daughter in your car, and say, man, I'll be back tomorrow. And when you got back tomorrow, you'd still have $20,000 worth of cash. I would have probably vacuumed your car out. Your daughter would be eating probably ice cream and unviolated. and you'd be going, dude, thanks a lot, you know. I mean, my whole life is like about service. If I can make your life easier just by talking to you, you know, or if you really need $5, I'll give you $5. If you need a job, I'll call somebody and try to, you know, I'm just trying to be a team player and have integrity at the same time.
Right on. That's cool, man. I love that answer. Todd, thanks for taking a minute out. This has been refreshing. I appreciate the music. I appreciate the time.
All right. Well, keep the faith, Joe, and thanks for everything you do.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Kansas City and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Todd for his time, his swagger, and his cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.